Beijing's roads are eerily empty with no passengers to pick up. Once a vibrant hub, the city now feels abandoned. The government hides the 1.4 billion population figure, claiming it's actually only in the millions. The deserted roads expose the CCP's lies. I used to ferry crowds, now my cab rolls through aimless streets. Their cover-up has destroyed my livelihood. My income is gone and my family is starving. The city's silence is a grim warning. Beijing is a shadow of its past. I feel like I'm driving into nothingness.
Deadly silence in China. Cities are empty. Real population only 300 m. Chinese claim of a 1.4 billion population has long cemented its status as the world's demographic titan, a narrative weaponized by the Chinese Communist Party, CCP, to lure global investment, flaunt its colossal domestic market, and assert geopolitical dominance. Yet mounting evidence from independent researchers shatters this facade, suggesting the true population may have dwindled to under 800 million before the COVID-19 pandemic. Between 2020 and 2023, estimates indicate a staggering loss of 150 to 200 million people, a demographic collapse of apocalyptic proportions that threatens to cripple China's economy and erode global trust in its self-proclaimed superpower status. This is no fringe theory.
It's 12:58 p.m. in Haichao, Guangdong Province. The streets lie silent, deserted. This once bustling bus terminal now echoes only with the rustle of dry leaves skittering across the pavement. The high-rise apartment blocks around, home to hundreds of families, stand mute as if abandoned. The children's playground beneath them, once alive with laughter, is empty and forlorn. Across the street, the basketball court holds only a few solitary figures, no voices, no camaraderie. Streetlights have come on early, but their weak glow does little to dispel the prevailing gloom. Where vehicles and crowds once surged, Haichao now feels like a ghost town. I stand here, listening to the cold wind with the unsettling sense that the city's heartbeat has stopped. This silence is like a curse, sending a chill down my spine. Haichao has become a place forgotten by time. This is the once vibrant clothing city on Chaoyang Street, formerly a bustling fashion hub where shoppers thronged every weekend. Now, the entire shopping complex has declared bankruptcy and is gearing up for a sweeping liquidation of dozens of storefronts and boutiques. Even the Yonghui supermarket on basement level B1, into which countless investors poured capital, won't be spared. According to the latest notice, all doors will be shuttered by the end of next month. In just a few short weeks, the neon lights and lively crowds that define this district will be replaced by empty corridors and padlocked entrances, marking a sorrowful end to what was once one of Haichao's busiest retail destinations. Many small businesses have already been forced to close early, their once bustling kitchens and offices now dark, staff packing away supplies in silence while delivery drivers disappear. Reports show dozens more shops and restaurants facing the same fate. Revenue slashed by low foot traffic, but costs, rent, utilities, wages, remain high. Some owners cut staff or reduced wages to stay afloat. Others took high-interest loans just to cover basic expenses. By month's end, they often don't have enough cash to pay the landlord. Bank officers call regularly about overdue payments, and shopkeepers lie awake at night, ledgers full of red ink marking losses they cannot erase. Even after draining personal savings, they still owe more than they earn. The local job market grows fiercely competitive as laid-off employees and hopeful graduates stand outside these empty businesses with resumes in hand. Each sunrise brings yet another closure and another silent doorway. The economic pressure feels unrelenting.
International experts, scrutinizing data from birth and death records, salt consumption, urbanization patterns, and leaked statistics on birth registrations, BCG vaccinations, and cremation activities, have exposed the official 1.42 billion figure as a gross fabrication. A toxic combination of plummeting birth rates, catastrophic COVID-19 mortality, and an aging population is driving an unprecedented demographic implosion, one the CCP has desperately concealed to preserve its grip on power. This article delves into the harrowing scope of Chinese demographic catastrophe, the evidence dismantling official claims, the CCP's brazen cover-up of COVID-19's toll, the motives behind this deception, and the urgent need for transparent data to avert further disaster. a historical review of demographic policies, from post-war growth to the devastating Great Leap Forward famine and the one-child policy, grounds the crisis in decades of mismanagement. The aim is to unveil the truth and demand independent oversight to force China and the world to confront this existential threat head-on. Since 2020, China has acknowledged its first population decline in 6 decades, a seismic shift for a nation once defined by its vast human resources. Official figures from the National Bureau of Statistics report a modest drop of 850,000 in 2022 and 1.3 million in 2023. Yet these numbers are widely dismissed as sanitized propaganda. Independent estimates suggest a cataclysmic loss of 150 to 200 million lives in the pandemic's first 3 years. A demographic hemorrhage that dwarfs official claims and signals a nation in freefall. The crisis stems from 3 devastating forces: a fertility rate in freefall, skyrocketing COVID-19 deaths, and an aging population spiraling out of control. In 2023, China's fertility rate plummeted to 1.18 children per woman, a far cry from the 2.1 needed to sustain a population. Crushing economic pressures, skyrocketing costs for housing, education, and healthcare, combined with the shift to nuclear families, rampant urbanization, and a growing aversion to marriage, have left young Chinese either unwilling or financially unable to bear children. Policy reforms, such as lifting the one-child policy to allow 2 children in 2016 and 3 in 2021, sparked a fleeting uptick in births before the decline resumed with a vengeance, underscoring the failure of belated interventions to reverse a deeply entrenched cultural and economic shift. Compounding this is the catastrophic toll of COVID-19, masked by the CCP's tightly controlled narrative. While the government claims a mere 83,000 deaths, analyses of cremation activity, burial density, and mobile data point to a death toll in the hundreds of millions. Crematoria, operating at maximum capacity, processed millions of bodies annually, with estimates suggesting up to 400 million deaths by early 2023. Scenes of ghost cities, deserted streets, shuttered malls, and idle industrial zones bereft of migrant workers paint a haunting picture of a nation hollowed out by loss. Rural healthcare systems, long neglected and underfunded, collapsed under the pandemic's weight, exacerbating mortality rates and exposing stark inequalities in access to care.
Nearby, lottery booths, once a cheap hope for people under financial pressure, stand almost deserted too, their bright neon signs blinking at empty queues. A single breeze rattles stacks of paper tickets inside their cases. The booth operators sit behind counters of dust-coated plastic, eyes fixed on the ground. Even on weekdays, foot traffic here is a mere trickle. The occasional passerby glances at the flashing signs but walks on. The promise of a small win no longer draws crowds. It seems that gambling on a dream has lost its appeal when everyday costs keep rising. A lone cashier folds ticket stubs into neat piles, waiting for anyone to buy. But the stall sits in silence, its hopeful glow feeling hollow. The factory in Shenzhen where I work is now a desolate wasteland, its production lines silent. Those who once worked beside me have left, leaving empty conveyors covered in dust. No longer do machines roar, only the wind whistles through broken windows. Hundreds of workers fled the city due to a lack of jobs, leaving the industrial zone like a graveyard. The dormitories near the factory are deserted, with bunk beds empty and old clothes abandoned. I walk through cold corridors, my footsteps echoing in the void. My family depends on my wages. But the factory is about to close. This area, once bustling with delivery trucks, is now steeped in deadly silence. Shenzhen feels like a city forsaken. I fear I'll have to leave too. But I don't know where to go. In the Xinjiku area, most storefronts now display "for rent" or are shut for good, with faded "for transfer" signs hanging in the windows of small restaurants, food stalls, and clothing stores that couldn't survive the drop in customers. Sidewalks lie bare, security guards wait idly by locked doors, and torn posters for last season's sales flutter in the breeze. Empty display racks stand behind dusty glass, and the entrance doors stay locked even during typical business hours. Faded banners proclaiming "grand opening" look absurd in the gloom. A few dim lights inside reveal stacks of boxes collected for removal. Delivery drivers no longer wait outside, their vehicles gone. The overall mood is one of quiet surrender. Even the most visible brands have surrendered to the downturn. The entire block feels like a ghost town sealed off from life. It's 7:30 p.m. in Beijing and the streets are completely empty, with almost every shop closed and not a single person in sight. The streetlights are on, but they don't make the area feel safe or warm. And even the hum of distant traffic is missing. I walk alone down wide sidewalks that feel far too large for someone traveling on foot. A light breeze carries bits of discarded paper across the pavement. Storefronts stand dark, their window displays fading into the night. Neon signs flicker half-heartedly, their glow unable to mask how empty everything is. Not a single delivery box remains on the curb, and trash bins stand unused. The silence is so thick it presses on my ears. I hurry home, eager to leave this desolate scene behind.
The economic fallout is nothing short of catastrophic. China's growth has long hinged on its demographic dividend, a vast, low-cost mobile workforce that powered its rise as the world's factory. Now, with the labor force shrinking at an alarming rate, industries face chronic shortages, driving up costs and eroding competitiveness against younger, cheaper markets like Vietnam and India. The elderly population, ballooning to unprecedented levels, imposes a crushing dependency ratio, straining pension and healthcare systems to the breaking point. Nations like Vietnam, Thailand, and South Korea, which navigated similar demographic shifts, saw GDP growth stagnate and social welfare costs soar. China, however, faces a crisis of far greater magnitude, with ripple effects threatening global supply chains and economic stability. The CCP's response has been to double down on deception, concealing the true scale of the crisis to protect its economic allure and political legitimacy. The 1.4 billion figure is a cornerstone of China's global influence, signaling a massive consumer market that attracts foreign investment and favorable trade deals. Admitting a population closer to 800 million would trigger investor panic, capital flight, and a collapse in Beijing's diplomatic leverage. Domestically, the CCP's legitimacy rests on its promise of prosperity. Acknowledging failures in the one-child policy or COVID-19 management risks igniting public fury, particularly as unemployment, housing costs, and medical expenses soar. The loss of 21 million mobile subscribers in early 2020, coupled with ghost city imagery and a leaked Shanghai database revealing only 970 million citizen records, underscores the scale of the cover-up, a betrayal of the Chinese people and the global community. The consequences of this deception are dire. A true population of 800 million, with a diminished middle class, obliterates the myth of a robust domestic market, leading to overproduction, misallocated investments, and crippling inventories. Businesses, misled by inflated data, pour capital into sectors like real estate, already drowning in unsold properties, only to face collapsing demand globally. China's role as a manufacturing hub is at risk as labor shortages drive up costs, prompting multinationals to shift investments to Southeast Asia or India. Socially, the aging crisis threatens to bankrupt pension systems, forcing higher taxes or reduced benefits, which could spark widespread unrest. The CCP's refusal to confront this reality not only undermines China's future, but also jeopardizes global economic planning, as nations and organizations rely on falsified data for critical decisions. Transparency is now a matter of survival. Independent oversight by organizations like the UN or WHO, using tools like satellite data, online censuses, and consumption metrics, e.g., salt, vaccines, is essential to verify China's population and guide policy. Without it, China risks plunging deeper into economic stagnation and social instability, dragging the global economy with it. Historically, China's demographic woes trace back to disastrous policies. In 1950, the population was 550 million. Mao's reforms boosted it to 660 million by the late 1950s. But the Great Leap Forward, 1956-1962, triggered a famine that killed 1545 million. Pro-natalist policies then drove fertility to 5-6 children per woman, reaching 850 million by the 1970s. The one-child policy 1979 slashed fertility to 1.9 by 1991, creating gender imbalances and an aging crisis. Relaxations in 2016 and 2021 failed to reverse the damage, as young people burdened by costs shun parenthood. These missteps, compounded by COVID-19's devastation, have pushed China to the brink. The CCP's relentless secrecy and abandonment of its people are a moral and strategic failure. By hiding the loss of hundreds of millions and inflating population figures, the regime prioritizes its image over the welfare of its citizens, leaving them to face a shrinking workforce, collapsing welfare systems, and a bleak future. This betrayal demands global condemnation and immediate action to enforce transparency, lest China's demographic collapse becomes a catastrophe for all. Determining China's actual population before COVID-19 is critical to understanding the extent of the decline. The official 2019 figure from China's National Bureau of Statistics was 1.42 billion, but independent studies dispute this. Russian researchers, analyzing demographic events from 1945, 490 million people, through major upheavals, Great Leap Forward, Cultural Revolution, one-child policy, argue that a rise to 1.4 billion is demographically implausible. They estimate the 2019 population at 500–800 million, based on natural growth models and the impact of large-scale mortality events. Additionally, a Japanese study on salt consumption, approximately 9.3 grams per person daily, used domestic production and trade data to estimate a population of 800–900 million, far below the official 1.42 billion. This method is reliable, as salt is a staple consumed consistently across the population with minimal waste or stockpiling. Equally significant is evidence of birth registration fraud. Under the one-child policy and later two- and three-child policies, families purchased fake birth certificates on the black market to avoid penalties for additional children, inflating birth data. Dr. Xi'an notes that over 20 social benefits tied to birth registration incentivized this fraud. In some regions, registered births exceeded actual births, adding tens of millions of phantom births annually. BCG vaccine data further exposes discrepancies. Mandatory within 24 hours of birth, BCG vaccine usage, tracked via barcodes and inventory, suggests only about 1.35 children per vial due to storage and procedural constraints. Comparing vaccine usage to official birth registrations from 2008 to 2021, researchers found a shortfall of 58 million births. Extrapolating backward, up to 178 million fictional births may have been recorded since the 1980s. Finally, comparing China to India over 3 decades, 1990–2020, reveals inconsistencies. Despite India's higher fertility rate, 3v1.7, and younger population, median age rising by 9 years vs 15 in China, India did not surpass China's population, a mathematical improbability. Demographic models suggest China's 2020 population was likely around 900 million. Following the 2019 outbreak, China enforced a stringent zero-COVID policy, lifted abruptly in late 2022. The government reported only 83,100 and 22,000 deaths throughout the pandemic, a remarkably low figure for its scale. However, indirect data and independent analyses suggest the true toll may reach hundreds of millions. Cremation statistics reveal stark discrepancies. In 2020, China's 6,619 crematoria, averaging 20 cases daily, 45-minute cycles over 15 hours, handled roughly 48.4 million cases. Since only 55.7% of deaths are cremated, this implies nearly 87 million total deaths. In 2021, with an 8–10% increase in crematoria and staff, approximately 92 million deaths occurred. By late 2022, estimates suggest a cumulative 277 million deaths, with an additional 83 million from the late 2022–early 2023 surge, totaling nearly 360 million. Second, the loss of 21 million mobile subscribers in early 2020, followed by another 5 million despite recovery claims, suggests mass deaths or large-scale emigration. Videos of ghost cities, empty streets, supermarkets, and subways, especially during the bustling Lunar New Year, corroborate this. Third, a leaked Shanghai citizen database of 970 million individuals raises questions. If China truly had 1.4 billion people, where are the missing 500 million records? This supports the hypothesis of hundreds of millions disappearing post-COVID. Finally, analyses by anonymous WHO staff and Epoch Times researchers using funeral industry data, crematoria numbers, processing times, and leaked police and health reports estimate over 400 million COVID-19 deaths from 2020 to early 2023. If the pre-pandemic population was around 800 million, nearly half may have perished, a devastating scenario consistent with observed realities. The CCP has strategic reasons for concealing the true scale of the demographic crisis and COVID-19 losses. First, China's economic growth over 4 decades relied on its demographic dividend, a large, low-cost, mobile workforce. Admitting rapid population decline and a shrinking rural labor pool would alarm investors, prompting capital flight to alternative markets. Second, population size is a diplomatic and commercial lever. 1.4 billion people signal a massive consumer market, attracting foreign direct investment and favorable trade terms. If trust in this figure collapses, Beijing's credibility in global economic and political forums would suffer. Internal politics also play a role. The CCP relies on economic success and promises of improved living standards to maintain power. Acknowledging failures in the one-child policy or COVID-19 control could erode leadership credibility, risking public unrest, especially amid rising unemployment, housing costs, and medical expenses. Admitting a population of only a few hundred million could trigger widespread discontent. The long-term consequences of this cover-up are severe. Socially, public discovery of the truth could erode trust in the government, increasing risks of protests or unrest. Families and society face instability as young people confront bleak prospects, fewer workers, more elderly to support, and soaring welfare costs. Diplomatically, nations and organizations relying on official population data for policy planning, aid, education, infrastructure will make flawed decisions. Finally, concealing the COVID-19 toll undermines trust in China's health and social data. In future pandemics or variants, skepticism about government information could fuel panic and hinder global coordination. While short-term stability may be preserved, the cost is long-term credibility and weakened crisis management. In macroeconomics, population size and workforce quality are critical. A 1.4 billion person market with a growing middle class drives domestic production and consumption, reducing export reliance. However, if the true population is 800 million, with lower disposable income, market demand is overestimated, leading to overproduction, misallocated investment, and massive inventory. Businesses, domestic and foreign, rely on population data, per capita GDP, and middle-class size for investment decisions, greenfield M&A joint ventures. Inaccurate data diverts capital to inefficient sectors. For example, China's property market, already burdened by high inventories, faces even weaker demand if the population is significantly smaller than reported. In global supply chains, China's role as the world's factory hinged on abundant young labor. Now, labor shortages raise costs, reducing competitiveness against younger, cheaper markets like Vietnam, India, or Southeast Asia. This risks accelerating investment shifts in industries like textiles, electronics, and machinery. At the macro level, social welfare policies, healthcare, pensions, unemployment, depend on contributions from the working population. Rapid aging and fewer workers threaten pension solvency, forcing higher contributions or reduced benefits, which could spark social unrest. Public debt may surge to fund large-scale fiscal stimulus. Given these risks, transparent population data is urgent. Independent oversight involving international organizations, UN, World Bank, WHO, should verify data using online censuses, satellite analysis, and consumption metrics, salt, vaccines, electricity. Transparency is not just a political responsibility, but the foundation for sound policies in welfare, healthcare, education, and sustainable development. Accurate data enables China to address its demographic crisis, sustain growth, and restore domestic and global trust. China's demographic history spans multiple phases, shaped by policies from post-war growth to famine and the one-child policy. In 1950, after decades of Japanese invasion and civil war, the population was about 550 million. Mao Zedong's policies, social stabilization, expanded healthcare and agricultural growth, reduced mortality, raising the population to 660 million by the late 1950s. However, the Great Leap Forward, 1958-1962, aiming for rapid industrialization, caused catastrophic famine due to poor agricultural techniques and falsified output reports, killing 15 million, 45 million. Though population growth stalled, Mao's pro-natalist stance, encouraging large families as patriotic, banning abortion, and rewarding big families with land, pushed fertility to 5-6 children per woman, with the population reaching 850 million by the early 1970s. Facing resource overload, the CCP launched the Later, Longer, Fewer campaign in the 1970s, a precursor to the One-Child Policy, 1979, limiting urban families to 1 child and rural families to 2 if the first was a girl. Enforced through sterilization, heavy fines, and unregistered invisible children, the policy curbed growth but saw the population exceed 1 billion by 1982, driven by earlier baby boom momentum. The one-child policy reduced fertility but caused severe imbalances, gender disparities favoring boys, early aging, and a 4-to-1 family structure, 1 child supporting 2 parents and 4 grandparents. Fertility fell from 6 children per woman, 1970, to 1.9 1991, below the 2.1 replacement rate, setting the stage for a prolonged birth crisis. By the 1990s-2000s, as China embraced a market economy, its baby boom population aged. Relaxations to 2 children 2016 and 3 2021 failed to reverse declining birth rates as young people faced high education, healthcare, and housing costs, leading to reluctance or inability to have children. This historical legacy, marked by aggressive population interventions, has led to rapid aging, a shrinking workforce, gender imbalances, and rising welfare costs exacerbated by COVID-19 and modern socioeconomic pressures. These past policies explain why China now faces a severe demographic crisis, compelling the CCP to conceal data and urgently restructure policies to address the challenge. The Chinese government's persistent secrecy and manipulation of demographic data reveal a disturbing pattern of prioritizing political control over the well-being of its people. By inflating population figures and downplaying the catastrophic loss of hundreds of millions during COVID-19, the CCP has not only misled the world, but also abandoned its citizens, leaving them to bear the consequences of a shrinking workforce, aging population, and strained welfare systems. This deliberate cover-up, rooted in maintaining economic allure and political stability, sacrifices the public's trust and future prospects. The refusal to acknowledge the crisis, coupled with historical policy failures like the one-child policy, demonstrates a callous disregard for the Chinese people, condemning them to an uncertain future while the regime clings to a facade of strength.